Hello everyone and welcome to another video. I'm really excited to show y'all what I was working on with this one. It's fan art, but in a very different style from what I normally do. I'll explain more in a moment, but for now let's get into the speed paint. So today I'm making two Madoka illustrations, and while I haven't drawn Madoka fan art in a really long time, it's been a formative piece of media for as long as I've been an artist, basically. Here's some awesome pictures of when I first started drawing in like 2011 and later in 2017. Funnily enough, I checked my file name for the 2017 one and the file for this video, and they're the exact same, so I guess I haven't changed that much in the last year, 8 years. My style is definitely different though. Thankfully, I've finally escaped the curse of only drawing a front-facing profile, although I do still love to do that, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, you can already tell that I'm absolutely not doing that for these two pieces. There's a lot going on and I never do stuff like this. So for background on this illustration and the other one in this video, I recently finished a Politics of Art in Post-War Japan class, and we had the option of either doing a regular midterm and final or a final project. Naturally, I chose the final project so that I could draw and not have to memorize names and shit for a written exam. My project was essentially to study the works of Japanese artist Takano Aya and incorporate her style into pieces related to Madoka Magica. I chose Takano in particular because a lot of her pieces have themes related to girlhood and utopia, which is sort of what I wanted to incorporate in these pieces. So along with my two pieces, I also wrote a paper about the capitalist exploitation of girlhood in modern Japan. That's a mouthful, I'm sorry. I'm not really going to be talking about any of that here because it's a lot, and I recently did a similar sort of video essay style video. That's video twice. But that video was pretty heavy, so I guess if you're interested in the topic, I'll link my paper in the description down below, but as I said, I'm not going to really talk about it. I just wanted to talk about the project a bit and Takano so that some of the design elements I'm including here make a bit more sense. So this is the first piece I'm making, and it's based off Takano's The Adventure Inside, which you can see here. And you can probably tell I kept a lot of the same composition as The Adventure Inside and essentially subbed out elements of Takano's piece for Madoka characters and magical girl iconography. I thought the bright colors and maximalism of The Adventure Inside paired really well with the aesthetics in Madoka, which tend to be very colorful and hyper-feminine, so I wanted to make this piece centered around Goddess Madoka. Of course, if you've actually seen the anime or read the manga, you'll know that these aesthetics are very much superficial, and the story is incredibly dark. So as you'll see for the second piece, I'll be touching more on that sort of chaos and turmoil which is reflected in the witch labyrinths in the show, and sort of the latter half of the show in general. Both of these pieces were definitely a challenge for me, mostly because I was trying to stay true to Takano's style, and it's certainly not my style. The way she draws figures and incorporates textures aren't really the ways I usually do it. I sort of have a cartoony bobblehead style for my Sona, but nothing exactly like the style which I'm trying here. Also, I almost never fill a canvas like this, though I've certainly been working on it recently. Trying to add a bunch of elements like the fireworks, the characters, the soul gems, and the other gems took me much longer than I thought it was going to. You see me going through like 4 iterations of the background in this one, so yeah, I was kind of struggling. The rendering process though was really fun because I got to work on simplifying the characters and their outfits to basic shapes and colors, which is something that makes the process much more streamlined and easier generally. This is something that I always dreamed of being able to do, like in the past. I was really inspired by artists that had this sort of mindless style, and then here I am actually doing it. I was like, yep, I'm doing this now, and it worked out. I don't know why I thought this was a big deal in the past. It's really nothing, but I really found my stride doing this in the second piece because I was so close to the deadline for this project that I had no choice but to be like, alright, gotta block in these shapes with the lasso tool, call it a day, this is how it's gonna be, I can't change it, I do not have the time for that. So yeah, although this was a very difficult and different style for me, I'm glad I got to experiment with some new things. For the figures, I included the main girls, so Madoka, Homura, Sayaka, Kyoko, and Mami. Saying that name correctly sounds so strange, but that is her name, so yeah. Here's your spoiler warning, by the way. I'll definitely be talking about the end of this anime and the movies, so just be prepared for that. Skip ahead if you don't want to hear that. I can't tell you to where exactly because I talk about this a lot, but yeah. Anyways, in this piece, only Madoka is in her magical girl costume, whereas the rest of the girls are in their schoolgirl uniforms. That's so hard to say. Schoolgirl uniforms. In Takano's The Adventure Inside, 3 of the figures are partially nude, and I chose to keep that choice in my piece so Sayaka, Kyoko, and Mami don't have shirts on. Objectively, I think it's a really weird and uncomfortable choice, but given the overall themes of my project, the choice does make a lot of sense. I'm sure we've all come across those anime that sexualize preteen girls for literally no reason at all, and I think it's become a very normalized trope even though it's super uncomfortable. So choosing to portray some of the girls as nude is a commentary on the vulnerability and sexualization of Japanese girlhood, even though the girls themselves are pre-sexual. This idea of vulnerability fits really well with Madoka Magica, also because the magical girls themselves are constantly in danger, and very few of these characters survive to the end of the show. I chose to title this piece For Your Sake, since it's sort of a depiction of Goddess Madoka breaking the cycle of exploitation that these magical girls are trapped in, and thus the rest of the girls are depicted without their costumes. But as I've said, some of the girls don't survive to the point in the story, so they're also depicted as semi-nude. The other point that I think is not as clear as I could have made it is that Goddess Madoka in her outfit has this gigantic train behind her dress, sort of like a cape. And I've depicted it with the starry night sky, but I wanted it only to cover Homura, whereas the rest of the girls are sort of outside the cape, because I think Homura is the only one who sort of benefits from the full protection of Goddess Madoka, and vice versa, mostly because by the end of the show, as I've said, Madoka and Homura are kind of the only 2 that survive. You see this sort of in reverse in the other piece, so I'll get to talk about that soon. But yeah, I hope all this imagery and iconography sort of makes sense, and if you're a fan of the show, that you're really digging this, because I put a lot of thought into what I wanted to include and where I wanted to include it, and overall I'm pretty happy with how things turned out. I want to go on a tangent real quick and announce, or rather re-announce, that my commissions are open. Currently I have offered full body characters, character sheets, portraits, and the sort of chibi style that I made for that folklore character series. I can throw them up here. I do them through this portal called Artistry, just so that I don't get scammed, because Tumblr bots love to scam me with this sort of thing, but thought I'd just announce it since it's the summer and I finally have more time. Take a look if you want. The link is in the description below. But that's the end for this piece. I'm just finishing up with the final touches, adding glow where I want, realizing that I haven't filled in some colors as much as I should have, and color correcting, which is very important for me. The last step of all my pieces is to adjust the color levels, make things more blue if I have to, purple, things like that. This side I went more blue and purple because I think that the night sky really fits, but here is the final piece, and on to the next one. The second piece I drew for this project is titled This Power Is Mine, and it's based on Takano's piece titled The Land of Sodom and Gomorrah, which I'll put up right here. For this one, I wanted to highlight the chaos and violence inherent in the identity of the magical girl as shown in Madoka Magica. One of my favorite things about the anime is its use of collage and surreal spaces when the girls enter the witch labyrinths, so I tried really hard to show that kind of chaos here. I wanted to experiment with weird patterns and textures, which required me to make some of my own and download some from the Clip Studio Asset Store. I have an old version of Clip Studio, so sometimes those didn't work, and that was very frustrating, but I don't want to pay for the new one, so here we are. I also used a lot of textured brushes to make the buildings themselves seem fuzzy, which I think is really in line with Takano's usage of strained perspective to create a general feeling of unreality. By the way, if you'd like to see the Pinterest board that served as the base inspiration for both of these pieces, I'll link it down below. When I originally planned these pieces, I did the preliminary sketches and tentative base colors at the same time, and then went on to rendering each piece one at a time. I chose to do this one second because I initially really wasn't ready to tackle all those textures and buildings and things that I don't normally draw. Perspective, I'm looking at you. There's barely perspective in this piece, but it was enough that I was not ready. I didn't have a lot of confidence in this piece turning out well because honestly, I just wasn't as engaged in it as the prior one, but the project deadline, it was coming up, so I kind of had no choice but to do it, and in the end, I actually ended up really enjoying this process, despite the amount of experimentation it required, or maybe because of the experimentation. As an artist, I always feel very conflicted about finding a niche in a definitive style versus experimenting with many new styles and trying new techniques. I'm sure if you are on the art side of YouTube, you'll see all those videos of like how to create your own style. And I think that can be helpful, but at the same time, I don't want to put myself in a box when I'm sort of still want to experiment with my art process. However, I do think I tend to lean towards the side of always sticking with the same style, so it was really good to break out of that and try some new things that I honestly never would have considered otherwise. Also, when I initially started on this project, I was really focused on keeping as loyal to Takano's pieces as possible by including similar color palettes and keeping elements of my own pieces pretty much one-to-one to the pieces I drew inspiration from. You can definitely see this with my first piece, For Your Sake, where pretty much all the objects are in the same place, the color scheme is very similar. But by the time I got to drawing this one, I was not about to create a one-to-one version of Land of Sodom and Gomorrah, but with Madoka imagery subbed out for Takano's original figures. I didn't have the time, I didn't have the energy, and looking back, I think it would have been pretty ingenuous, both to myself and the purpose of this project, because I was unconsciously constraining myself in my own interpretations and artistic sensibilities. So while you can tell that This Power Is Mine is definitely based off of Takano's Land of Sodom and Gomorrah when you view them side by side, I let myself take more liberties with this process than I did in the previous illustration. For one thing, I completely changed the color palette. I decided that the background should be the ruined cityscape that's shown in Madoka during the scenes with Walpurgis. Sorry about the pronunciation. The ruined cityscape stands in contrast with the bright buildings in the mid and foreground, which the characters themselves inhabit. I filled one of the buildings with the witches' familiars, which are featured throughout the anime, because I really just wanted an excuse to draw those little mustache puff guys. Love those guys. As for the magical girls, since they're in the labyrinth setting, it made sense to draw them in their costumes, but also to draw them at their worst moments. Once again, this is about to be very spoiler heavy, so skip ahead if you're not into that. As far as worst moments, I think the most recognizable is Nami getting her head bitten off by Charlotte. In the anime, I think that's the turning point where you realize that Madoka is a magical girl anime, but not in the same way as Sailor Moon or Cardcaptor Sakura. In fact, I think it's actually very critical of the genre itself, and of shoujo anime in general. Next are Sayaka and Kyoko, who are fighting each other. All the narratives in Madoka are really tragic, but the one including Sayaka really stands out to me because she's my favorite character, and I really relate to the whole academic grind, extracurricular grind / obsession in which you never feel you're good enough, and that's very much her narrative. Sayaka and Kyoko pretty much take each other out in the anime, so I thought it was very fitting to put them in direct opposition in this piece. Finally, we have Devil Homura in the foreground, who's meant to be the central figure of this illustration in the same way Goddess Madoka is in the other one. In fact, I included Madoka very small in this piece. You can like Where's Waldo it or whatever, you can see it very easily, but that's just a side note. Having Devil Homura in one piece and Goddess Madoka in the other ties the pieces together by contrasting the ideal imagery of the magical girl as bright and shiny against the reality of the magical girl who is forced to face violence, death, and tragedy. If you know anything about the show, you'll know that Homura and Madoka have a very complicated and often tragic relationship that really could be a video in and of itself. But what I'm focusing on here is the ways in which they respond to the exploitation by Kyubey and the magical girl system. Whereas Goddess Madoka chooses to martyr herself and save all the other magical girls, Devil Homura locks those she loves into her own quasi-witch labyrinth so that she can keep them safe but also trapped forever. It's sort of selfishness versus selflessness, but also I think Homura's choice is very understandable in wanting to protect those you love, but also keeping them alive and keeping yourself alive. I could go into so much analysis on this anime and the imagery and everything, but I'll just leave it at that for now. That's about all I have to say about the imagery and symbolism of these two pieces I've made. I hope you guys are excited for the 4th Madoka movie! When will it come out? I don't know, they've been teasing it for like 4 years, and I'm just so excited to see how everything pans out in the end. But yeah, overall, I'm really happy with both of these pieces. I think I got to try a lot of new things, as I've said. I experimented with a completely different style. I did a lot in a very small amount of time. I also wrote a 14-page paper. Oh my god! But yeah, like, I'm so glad that at the finale of my academics, I got to make pieces fun like this. And here are the final pieces. I hope you like both of them. I hope this was sort of a fun new video for you. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.